You think they value your presence because you show up every time, because you're always one call away, one text away, one late-night conversation away from pouring yourself out for them. And maybe, at first, they do value it, or at least they think they do. But slowly, without even realizing it, they begin to treat what is always available as if it has no cost, because in their mind, it doesn't. The truth is unsettling. People don't respect what they don't have to earn. What is abundant loses its weight. The water they never thirst for becomes invisible. And that's what happens to you when you give too much, too often. Not because you're wrong for being kind or loyal or dependable, but because human psychology, uncomfortable as it is built on contrast, on scarcity, on perceived value. When you're always there, they stop asking why you're there. And worse, they stop wondering what would happen if you weren't. But the moment you step back, even slightly, everything begins to shift. Not because you're playing games or trying to be manipulative. You're just finally choosing to protect the most undervalued resource in the equation, your time, your energy, your presence. And in that pause, in that deliberate withdrawal, people are forced to confront what they had and what they never fully appreciated. Schopenhauer once said that solitude is the fate of all great minds. And maybe he was onto something that goes deeper than intellect. Maybe it's not just about thinking clearly, it's about seeing clearly. And you can't see clearly when you're surrounded by noise, when your attention is constantly being siphoned off by people who want you close, but don't know how to honor you when you are. You don't realize how much you've been leaking until you finally close the valve. You've been bleeding availability into people who treat it like air, essential but unnoticed. And now that you've stopped, now that you're quieter, more distant, more intentional, there's a disturbance in the pattern. They start to feel something they haven't felt before, the absence of you. Not just physically, but emotionally. The absence of your warmth, your listening, your validation, your consistent reassurance. And that absence speaks louder than anything you ever said when you were showing up for them. What they hear in your silence is not rejection, it's clarity. That you're no longer willing to beg to be seen. That you've stopped making yourself smaller just to fit into their moments of convenience. And for the first time, they're forced to ask questions they've never had to consider. Why did you always say yes? Why were you always there, even when they offered so little in return? Why did you keep showing up for people who would vanish the second you needed the same? And those questions echo, not because you're punishing them, but because you're finally honoring yourself. Human nature has a cruel pattern. We often wake up to value after it's gone. We see the worth of silence only after being deafened by constant noise. And we recognize emotional labor only once it's been withdrawn. That's not necessarily evil, it's just instinct. But if you keep handing yourself out like a gift no one has to open, you become background noise to the very people who once begged to hear your voice. Withdrawal is not cruelty, it's clarity wrapped in quiet. It's the refusal to keep throwing pearls where they are stepped on. It's not revenge, not spite, it's self-respect. And self-respect never raises its voice. It simply stops participating. And suddenly, everything changes. They begin to see you not just as a person, but as a boundary, as someone with a spine, not just a heart, as someone who can walk away if needed. And more than any words you've ever spoken, is what makes people wake up. The energy you've been spreading thin, you begin to feel it gather in you again. Your thoughts feel more coherent. Your emotions stop feeling hijacked. The emptiness you once tried to fill with other people's presence starts to feel sacred instead of lonely. You no longer crave validation from those who never earned your trust. You no longer chase conversations that leave you drained. You no longer confuse being wanted with being respected. Because now you see the truth, that some people only love you when you're bending, when you're convenient, when you require nothing. But love, that's only love when it's easy, when it's one-sided, when it costs you everything and them nothing. That's not love. That's consumption. You start to feel the strength that Schopenhauer described, the power of detachment, the richness of a life that doesn't depend on external approval to feel meaningful. You begin to curate your time with the precision of someone who knows what their worth is. You stop giving explanations to people who've never earned your vulnerability. You stop apologizing for needing space, for saying no, for choosing your peace over someone else's drama. And the beauty of it is that the people who truly value you, they won't disappear. They'll adjust. They'll rise. They'll start showing up differently, because now they're meeting someone they can't take for granted. Someone who knows their own value and doesn't need to scream it from the rooftops. When you stop being available, everything changes. Not because the world suddenly becomes better, but because your view of it does. Because now, instead of being pulled in every direction, you're grounded. Instead of being everywhere, you're centered. Instead of leaking your soul into shallow connections, you're pouring it into people and places that reflect it back. You become selective, not out of pride, but out of necessity. You become unavailable, not out of arrogance, but out of survival, because you've learned what they never taught you, that you were never supposed to be everything for everyone, that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to step away, to be missed, to be longed for, to be remembered not as the one who was always there, but as the one whose absence changed everything. You'll notice something strange once you stop being available. The energy around you starts to change, not instantly, but steadily, like a fog lifting. People who once flooded your inbox grow quiet. Invitations dry up. The calls stop coming. At first it might sting. You might even take it personally. You'll wonder if stepping back made you invisible, if people only liked the version of you that was always accessible, always agreeable, always at their emotional service. And the truth? Some did. They were drawn to your availability because it gave them power. It made them feel needed, adored, prioritized, without them ever needing to return the gesture. And when you take that away, the illusion breaks. You stop being the mirror that reflects back their best self. You become a person again, a whole one with needs, limits, boundaries. And not everyone wants to deal with a whole person. Some only want the reflection, the version of you they can control, the one that bends, that pleases, that disappears when inconvenient. But don't confuse silence with rejection. What you're experiencing is a recalibration. You're removing the noise so you can finally hear what matters. And for the first time in a long time, you'll feel the difference between connection and dependence, between being chosen and being used, between being liked for what you give and being loved for who you are when you give nothing. It's not your job to keep the world emotionally fed. It's not your purpose to be everyone's safe space when no one's offering you shelter in return. That's not virtue. That's self-abandonment. Arthur Schopenhauer believed that most suffering is rooted in misguided desire, the constant craving for approval, attention, affection. And he was right, because the more you chase those things outside yourself, the more hollow you feel inside. It's a treadmill that never stops. You give, they take. You show up, they expect more. You make space, and somehow they still say it's not enough. But the moment you stop, the moment you finally sit with the discomfort of being misunderstood, unseen, maybe even unloved, something else awakens. Peace. Not the performative peace of smiling through exhaustion, not the shallow peace of being praised for your patience, but real peace, the kind that comes from no longer needing to explain yourself, from knowing you're enough without being everything. That's when your value begins to solidify in the minds of others. Slowly, they'll start to remember your words, your gestures, your presence. The emotional labor you once offered so freely now echoes in its absence. And for those with any depth, any sense of conscience, that echo will be deafening. You see, people rarely understand the cost of your energy until they're asked to pay it themselves. You being less available isn't about withholding love. It's about reclaiming dignity. It's about choosing depth over performance and presence over pleasing. And yes, some will call you selfish, but that accusation says more about their entitlement than your ethics. Because to people who only valued your yes, your no will always sound offensive. But the right ones, the real ones, they won't punish your silence. They'll meet it with understanding. They won't resent your absence. They'll ask what it means. They won't fear your boundaries. They'll respect them because they'll see the human behind them. Not a resource, not a therapist, not an emotional punching bag, a person, and they'll show up accordingly. This is how the quality of your life changes, quietly but profoundly. When you stop being available to everyone, you start becoming truly available to yourself. You realize how many of your choices were based on fear of being forgotten, left out, unloved. And now, stripped of all that noise, you begin to choose differently, not to prove anything, but because you finally have the space to think, to feel, to see clearly. You'll start creating from a place of truth, not obligation. You'll notice who leans in when you step back, who reaches out not because they need something, but because they care. You'll start to see the patterns that once blurred together, the emotional takers, the subtle manipulators, the ones who disguised their dependence as love. And you'll let them go, not with rage, not with revenge, but with stillness, with peace. Because now you don't need to win, you just need to be free. And freedom, real freedom, always begins with limits. Limits on your time, your attention, your emotional availability, and most importantly, limits on how much of yourself you're willing to lose just to be loved. So now you show up differently. You don't rush to fill every silence. You don't over-explain. You don't try to fix what someone else broke in themselves. You listen more. You speak less. You observe who comes close when you offer nothing but your presence. No favors, no emotional labor, no extra effort to be understood. And the ones who stay, they're gold, because they see the value not just in what you do, but in who you are when you do nothing at all. This shift in availability isn't an act of coldness. It's an act of consciousness. You're not becoming distant. You're becoming whole. You're not withdrawing love. You're withdrawing performance. You're not closing off. You're refining access. And those who can't handle it, let them go. With love, yes, but also with finality. You owe no one the version of you that broke just to keep others comfortable. You owe yourself the peace that comes with being seen as you truly are. Imperfect, limited, worthy. And that peace only arrives when you stop handing yourself out like a remedy for other people's emptiness. Let them feel your absence. Let them sit in the void that your constant availability used to fill. Let them wonder what changed. And if they care enough, they'll ask. If they're worthy, they'll adjust. If they're capable of depth, they'll meet you in your quiet, without fear, without